After I first played Yoshi's Island some years ago, I was hooked. At that time though, I didn't have the money to buy it. So years later, I purchased Yoshi's Island DS, hoping for that same experience. Needless to say, I did not get that experience. But about a year ago, I managed to find Yoshi's Island for the Super Famicom and immediately picked it up. But it doesn't work per se. You know what, let me explain. Basically, when I play the game, it will save fine, and when I turn it off and back on, it will keep my save. But sometimes, it won't boot up. It'll just give me a black screen, and when I finally get it to boot, it deletes my save file. So, I thought it was the battery, but it wasn't. The battery is fine. So I thought, well, maybe it's the pins, something going on with that. So I cleaned the pins multiple times. It still has the problem. It still deletes my save, but it's not the battery. So I don't know. I gave up. If you know what the problem is, please let me know. I really want to play this game again. But this video isn't about my desire to play an amazing game. It's about your desire to learn more about this amazing game. So on this episode of Beta64, I'm going to tell you about the beta of Yoshi's Island. Information about Yoshi's Island development is very scarce, but I managed to come across a couple of very interesting pieces of information. First, Miyamoto stated that he wanted to create a game starring Yoshi since Super Mario World, but he didn't want a spin-off game like Yoshi's Cookie or Yoshi's Safari. Instead, he wanted to create a full-on platformer with Yoshi as the star. During development, Donkey Kong Country was released to the public and was credited as the first video game to use pre-rendered sprites, which created a pretty incredible 3D effect. While Miyamoto was developing Yoshi's Island, he was approached by Nintendo's marketing department and asked to use the same 3D sprite effect in his new game. Miyamoto chose instead to make the graphics look as if they were drawn by hand, which thankfully was approved by the marketing department. It's rumored that the 3D sprites used in the intro were actually leftovers from this stage of development. Now I think it's time to put the greatest question of all to rest. Why is the game called Super Mario World 2? There are two reasons for the interesting name. The first reason is that Miyamoto and the rest of the development team considered the game to be part of the Mario series. But the biggest reason behind the name was that the team wasn't sure how well the game would sell. So in order to draw more attention to it and tie it in with an already successful franchise, it was called Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island in US and Europe, and Super Mario Yoshi's Island in Japan. The amount of unused objects left over in Yoshi's Island more than makes up for the lack of developmental information. To start, the title screen island was originally populated by even more objects. There were originally jungle trees, a large Yoshi egg, 2 kinds of mushrooms, some towers, a cable car, and the hole in the ground from the World 6 map. The cable car and tower sprites can even be discussed in more detail. The towers have consistent designs with the fortresses found throughout the game. This tower was meant for World 1, the red towers for Worlds 2 and 4, the red roof towers for World 6, and the last tower is for Worlds 3 and 5. The World 1 fortress was actually used on the final island as the towers for World 3's castle. The possible cable car sprite may seem a bit uninteresting, but let's speculate for a minute. Maybe Yoshi was intended to cross over the mountains using a cable car instead of just walking on air. But then again, perhaps it isn't even a cable car after all. You never know. Now that we're on the subject of unused sprites, here are some of the star of the show. Yahoo! These unused heads show Yoshi looking up from both the front and back view. Likely these were intended to be used when you look up. So instead of just having Yoshi's eyes move, his whole head would have moved too. These frames also include an early hit animation, shown near the center. An unused frame of a red Yoshi, sleeping, I guess, is found within some frames of a magnet, which were later used by Baby Wario in Yoshi's Island DS. These early skiing Yoshi frames are quite interesting. Can you guess why? It's because his eyes look slightly different. Oh, and Baby Mario is also missing from Yoshi's back, but who really cares if Mario is missing? Huh? Get it? Like the game? Nah, never mind. I don't need humor in these videos. Speaking of Mario, there are a few unused frames of Baby Mario as well. This first is of him crawling, but the only time Baby Mario is off of Yoshi is when he gets the Superstar, and even then he runs, not crawls. So maybe there were going to be opportunities for Mario to crawl on his own to solve puzzles. Hey, that would actually be pretty cool. I should call Nintendo about this. Oh, right, sorry. No humor, got it. Here's a frame of Baby Mario doing a victory pose. These unused animation frames show Baby Mario waving at the player, and this last scrap frame is likely showing him being held up by the magnet. The kanji shown with it means temporary. This could mean that it was intended to be anything, or perhaps the idea of the magnet was scrapped before they finalized the sprite. Now let's move on to scrapped enemies. Here are some frames of a happy Bomb-Omb that never appeared in the game. This larger version of a grinder, made to look like Donkey Kong, also never found its way into the final game. These frames even come with a barrel and a throwing animation. That's pretty neat. Another removed enemy is the remains of what is thought to be Rocky Wrench, which is confirmed by the fact that he's the only character in the Mario series who can throw a wrench. Apart from removed enemies, there are quite a few baddies who were changed throughout development, like this Nipper for instance. In every Mario game before Yoshi's Island, Nippers were always completely white, which makes sense why the developers eventually made him white. Interestingly though, the Nipper spore that creates the enemy in the final game is actually the same color as the original scrap Nipper. As you can see here, this is an early Sluggy, which is definitely much rounder than the final version. The boss Raphael the Raven has an interesting secret in the final game. Even though it can't be seen, there's actually a star on his chest. The reason it can't be seen in the final version is because the star is the same color as the rest of Raphael. It's obvious that this was intended by the developers and not simply a mistake. So why'd they do it? We have no idea. Sorry about that. Some things we just don't know. Moving onwardly, let's discuss removed objects. First up, we have the Dragon Coin. Your first instinct may be to write this off as a leftover sprite from Super Mario World. But if you look over it closely, you'll notice that it's completely different from the original Dragon Coin, meaning that it was intended to be added to the game. But where? I think it's okay to assume that it was the smiley flowers that replaced the coins. I mean, there are 5 of them in every level, they both give you another life when they're all collected, and collecting a flower in the final game even makes a coin sound. So it's not unlikely that this coin would have acted the same as the flower does. Now here are a couple of unused objects that will make you say, huh? Because they're question marks. A little humor won't hurt anybody. This first object is obviously a question mark block, and was likely meant to function as one. This question mark box, on the other hand, was likely an alternate or early design for the box found in the final game. Alright, what's next? More unused stuff. Looks like we haven't even scratched the surface of this Yoshi-shaped iceberg. So in order to make this next section a little more interesting, let's play a game I like to call Name Those Unused Backgrounds with your host, Quizmo. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to show you 3 background images on the board. 2 are unused, but 1 isn't. Do you think you know Yoshi's Island enough to name those unused backgrounds? Okay, first round. Can you guess which are not seen in the final game? Alright, here's the answer. Did you guess correctly? Let's hear about them in more detail. Rod?
Thanks, Quizmo. This first unused background is a less detailed version of the final jungle background.
and this one includes pink trees and some clouds, all of which scroll on different layers. Alright, on to round 2. This time we're showing 4 backgrounds, with 3 of them being unused. And here's the answer. Can we hear more about them, Rod? Sure thing. This first background is another less detailed jungle. And surprise fact, it goes great with the first unused jungle background as well. Next, we have this lovely night background. Though it looks almost identical to the background used in World 6, don't be fooled. This version includes never before seen clouds, and the moon in this version scrolls across the screen when you move. And lastly, this background shows some beautiful hills tangled in a web of clouds. Fantastic! And now for the final round. I'll show you 5 backgrounds, and you must tell me which 3 are unused. Okay, show us those answers! Wonderful! What can you tell us, Rod? Well, I can tell you that these unused dots could perhaps been meant to be snow. And I can safely say that this background is some stones. And this one shows a lovely sunset. Like the one you'll see in your trip to Kyoto, Japan! Thanks, Rod, and thank you for playing Name Those Unused Backgrounds! Okay, back to reality. Before, we talked about unused sprites. Now it's time we talked about unused sprites that actually do something when placed in-game. Let's start with a Boo Blah holding a pyro dangle. No, I'm not pretending to be Dr. Seuss, these enemies are actually in the final game. Now, despite looking pretty awesome, there is no difference in behaviors between this and a normal Boo Blah. The sprite set housing this baddie is also only used in the Baby Mario Star Room in World 2.5, which actually has no enemies in it. This bullet bill with cannon, not shown here, is completely functional when placed in-game. And while it wasn't used in Yoshi's Island for the SNES, the Game Boy Advance port actually uses the bullet bill in Secret Level 6-9. It behaves in the Game Boy Advance port just as it does in the original SNES version. Some removed minigames were also buried in the files for Yoshi's Island. This generic battle room includes a timer and scores for both Bandit and Yoshi. Perhaps it was used as a coin collecting minigame, though technically it could be anything. This next unused minigame appears to be a racing battle against Bandit, as it includes a minimap on the top of the screen. This final scrap minigame is definitely the most interesting. It includes a timer, a score of 4 for Bandit, 4 missile launchers with accompanying missiles, and 4 houses. With 4 being the main focus here, it makes sense that the point of this minigame was for Yoshi to destroy each house before the time runs out. There are sprites for broken versions of both the houses and missile launchers included with the sprites. During the course of Yoshi's Island, Yoshi transforms into a variety of different objects. A car, a helicopter, a mole tank thing, a submarine, a train, you name it, Yoshi's been in. But there are other transformations as well, ones that went unused in the final game. One of these was a plane, likely replaced by the helicopter. Another one is a happy little mushroom. Animations for this transformation include hopping, falling, and just being a mushroom. The last and most interesting scrap transformation is a textile factory. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's a tree. Yoshi was originally meant to be a walking tree. Yeah. So that's the beta of Yoshi's Island. Despite the lack of information regarding the game's development, the incredibly large amount of unused, scrapped, and early sprites tell us the story themselves. A story involving missiles, walking trees, and questions. Marks. Question marks. Still not funny? Alright. So this has been Beta64 with the Yoshi's Island beta. Thanks for watching.